Abortion, Opening Up the Main Crack in America. By Edwin Oslin. The bastards finally did it. They blew it up. After the Supreme Court proved how ineffectual they are during the 2020 election, giving us the impression that they stick with the status quo and only rule on cases which 90% of Americans agree on anyway, or just don't care about, they went and flipped, or at least planned to flip, the 49-year-old decision that codified the supposed right to have an abortion into federal law, and the only Supreme Court decision most people under 35 have even heard of. Let's get one thing out of the way. If you're someone who considers yourself only fiscally conservative, as in, you're a GOP member who doesn't care about abortion, gay marriage, young people smoking pot, illegal immigration, jobs being outsourced to China, leftist cancel culture at big tech, and you're liberal on everything else, then your arguments have been rendered null and void. Trump's installation of 3 socially conservative judges onto the Supreme Court makes you just as complicit in the overturning of Roe v. Wade as if you were a member of the Westboro Baptist Church. I hate to say it like that, but that's just how it is. You could be a totally freewheeling, drinking, drugging, slut-screwing party animal who just voted for Trump for fiscal reasons, but you're effectively on the same side as all the disparate Christian groups that the left lump together as the religious right. If you're okay with that, as I am, then congratulations. Aside from the visceral thrill of watching the usual gang of blue-haired land whales and pussy-hat-wearing soccer moms flipping out, reversing Roe v. Wade is the social equivalent of ripping a band-aid off an enormous bloody gash and pouring rubbing alcohol all over it. It's the political equivalent of tearing the floorboards out of a house and cleaning out all the rot, debris, and termites underneath. Regardless of how the 2022 midterms turn out, and I still believe they'll turn out fairly well for Republicans, reversing Roe v. Wade had to be done in order to bring the culture war to a head. I still maintain that Democrats can lower taxes to zero, close the border, make it mandatory to attend church every Sunday, and insist that every American household keep firearms, but just as long as they remain the pro-choice party, while the Republicans are the party that, at the very least, looks disdainfully on abortion, the Democrats will always keep their core base of voters, primarily women and overly sympathetic liberal men. The Democrats can suck up to minorities, gays, and transsexuals, they can push for electric cars, offer to pay off student debts, threaten to take away all the guns, and erect all the holy George Floyd shrines they want. But these are disparate issues that really only concern the leftist and progressive wing of the party. The only thing uniting the Nancy Pelosi sect and the squad is abortion, and without it, they have nothing. Since Women's Lib, abortion has been perceived as the final failsafe which allows women the ability to have sex without consequences. If the condoms and pills fail, and for some reason, a woman fails to obtain the easily obtainable morning after pill, then she can just get an abortion, and it's like nothing ever happened. Any of those other extenuating circumstances like rape or incest which were used to push the abortion agenda are just that, extenuating circumstances, and are thus negligible. Whether abortion is morally wrong or, more specifically, whether abortion is murder is an entirely different matter and one which I find rather boring. After all, for every charge that abortion is murder, one could counter by asking if it's not justified to commit such a murder if the mother was addicted to crack. So I'm just gonna leave that one alone and say that the main reason women have abortions is simply because they don't want to have kids. And I think abortion is so central to the Democratic Party at this point, that it's perfectly fair to refer to it as the abortion party. That's why this issue stings so much to liberals and leftists, and why all the leftist infighting, while amusing to watch, adds up to nothing when the quintessential liberal issue is now in question. There's also the background concern that, if the Supreme Court can flip Roe v. Wade, then they can just as easily flip any other decisions they've made in the past, and fundamentally reshape the country in all kinds of ways leftists find icky. They could just as easily reshape the country the other way as well, but we'll save that topic for another time. Of course, in practice, as anyone familiar with civic issues understands, nullifying Roe v. Wade doesn't make abortion illegal. It just brings the decision back to the states. Obviously, the big concern is that women living in deep red states will immediately be denied access to an abortion and be forced to jump in their Teslas and bolt for blue states to avoid derailing their ultra-important HR careers talking down to people who do real work. On the contrary, I wouldn't put it past Gavin Newsom to make abortion laws so lax in his state that they'll allow a mother to donate her newborn baby to a ritual satanic sacrifice, which, of course, will be protected under religious freedom. Other than the question of gas mileage, the abortion debate really is just a matter of perception and optics. After all, if you're married with a family, or if you can't get laid, or if you're menopausal, or you just never plan on having an abortion, the abortion debate is pretty irrelevant to you. As such, I hear concern from some on the right, claiming that overturning Roe v. Wade will inevitably reverse all the gains the Republicans have made recently, and cause them to lose in the midterms. If only because certain hardcore pro-life Republicans won't be able to keep their yaps shut and will immediately push for federal abortion bans or really harsh draconian punishments for anyone who either gets or gives an abortion. I see this mainly as either the talk of the demoralized, or of people who grew up in prior generations where abortion was a much more pressing issue. The so-called abortion wars are over, and statistically fewer people are in favor of abortion than they were in previous generations. That might have to do with how the abortion discussion magically shifted from safe, legal, and rare to wowie, zowie, I'm on my 27th abortion. Aren't you proud of me? You better be, you misogynist pig. Also, the quivering fear that some dopey Republicans will inevitably say something cringeworthy and stupid, and they probably will, doesn't take anything else going on in the country at the moment into consideration, and makes it seem as though abortion is the only thing on Americans' minds at all times. This is the era of Joe Biden, a man who has dementia, who wants to send $40 billion of taxpayer money to Ukraine, who is causing gas prices to skyrocket, who won't allow oil contractors to drill, who is pushing for clean energy solutions that most people can't afford, who refuses to even address the surge of illegal aliens at the border, who is causing disruptions in the supply chain, leading ironically to shortages in baby formula, and who stopped construction of Trump's border wall, which costs 8 times less than how much money Biden wants to send to Ukraine. We're on the cusp of stagflation, skyrocketing inflation, and foreclosures, and Americans will vote for more of that because abortions? Does that make any sense? I know the vast majority of people are uneducated rubes and bumpkins, but what happened to it's the economy, stupid? Is it only the economy, stupid, when Roe v. Wade doesn't get reversed? Don't get me wrong, overturning Roe v. Wade has given the Democrats an issue to rally behind, sure. Furthermore, the early leak of this decision was probably done to ignite those fiery but mostly peaceful protests, and to intimidate a judge or two to reverse course. In all honesty, when Jen Psaki encourages mostly peaceful protests outside of judges' homes, I get the impression she's hoping some unhinged psycho will take out one of the judges. And then, after a couple of weeks of disingenuous mourning, they replace the judge with another progressive, tipping the majority back the other way. After all, nothing outside of removing one of the judges will change their decision. It's a done deal. And, while the leaker of the SCOTUS decision should be dealt with just because, you're not supposed to do stuff like that, it's probably better that the decision did leak 2 or so months ahead of its official announcement, since it was going to happen anyway. And now the shock won't be as severe. And now Republicans have some time to strategize and do some damage control. Also, people forget, the midterms are in 6 months. In this wacky, unpredictable environment, who knows what the hell can happen? Joe Biden might stroke out by then. Wouldn't you think having Kamala Harris as president would guarantee the Republicans a default victory? Doesn't every president lose his Congress to the rival party in the midterms, anyway? But, regardless of how the midterms go, how does this shake out in the long run? With 26 states set to enact trigger laws that immediately make abortion illegal or more restrictive, I think this will also trigger the much-needed political balkanization between two sides whose differences cannot be reconciled. The red states will get redder, as liberals refuse to relocate to them no matter how bad California, New York, and Oregon become. While hardcore progressives and SJW types, living in red states, will simply either move out of them or be driven into little pockets of obscurity. Furthermore, red states will be seen as too retrograde and reactionary for middle-of-the-road liberals and rhinos to move to as well. And those dejected Democrats who began voting Republican for lack of any other choices, but who still have some blue state residue, will be forced to do some major soul-searching about how important abortion really is to them. Are they willing to entirely divorce themselves from the leading issue of the Democratic Party in order to enjoy the guns and low taxes that are part and parcel of living in a red state? Or is abortion so important to them that they'd rather live in a blue state, which will inevitably be driven further to the left, forcing them to endure rising crime rates, gay and transsexual pride parades, stupidly high taxes, long waiting periods for guns, super expensive electric cars, one-room pot apartments, and all-you-can-eat bug buffets? I know my thesis sounds rather reductive, and there will be outliers. After all, if you're in a red state that borders a blue state, and you're just a hop, skip, and a jump away from an abortion clinic, then you get your cake and get to abort it too. Though, I hear talks that Greg Abbott plans to make interstate abortion travel a crime too. So, who knows? But, in the end, is not the loss of abortion access worth the other perks of living in a safe and prosperous red state? Some losses to consider, which I'm not trying to trivialize, affect those involved in the arts and entertainment industries, along with more progressive-leaning corporations. I can imagine, in the near future, Bruce Springsteen refusing to perform in pro-life states. I can imagine controversy being generated over artists and musicians who make tour stops in these red states, the way Sabbath got shit for playing in South Africa in the late 80s. And how Nick Cave and Public Image Limited were criticized more recently for doing shows in Israel. I can imagine there being major conflicts over red states offering killer tax incentives for Hollywood studios to make movies in their states, and those studios having to decide whether to save money or appease progressives. I can imagine overly privileged actors, writers, directors, and producers having massive strikes against studios that decide to make movies in red states. I can imagine a major Hollywood studio starting to film a picture in Texas, only to eat the cost of the project halfway through, due to pressure from progressives. I can imagine corporations in general having to make some big decisions about which states they should set up shop in, or what kind of ad campaigns to run in different states. And I can imagine states starting to develop their own local cultures, devoid of big corporations and the major entertainment industry. I can picture left-leaning corporations staging starbout campaigns, where they refuse to deliver their goods to red states, forcing those states into creating their own local economies and only networking with other red states. I think the abortion issue has the potential to drive progressive universities out of red states, leaving a vacuum for all new merit-based universities to take their places. And if internet providers decide to pull their bases of operation out of red states, then that could allow those states to build their own internet as well. They don't call abortion a wedge issue for no reason. And no matter how many people think it just shouldn't be, because there are more important concerns, like the economy, immigration, outsourcing of jobs, aggressive leftist censorship, and the overall fundamental push for Great Reset scenarios, the fact remains that there are those who feel abortion is murder, and others who feel abortion is freedom. These sides cannot be reconciled. You're either for abortion, and, yes, if you're pro-choice, you're for abortion, or you're against it. And, if you live in one of the states which errs on the side of being against abortion, then you might just see one less Starbucks on your block. What a loss! Can you survive?